Connie Warren, a resident of the town of Baldwin in the county of Cumberland and in the state of Maine. I, Deborah Wakefield, town clerk, consistent with the method of notification adopted by the town of Baldwin, certify that the direction of Connie Warren, I notified the voters of Baldwin of the time and place of the special town meeting. I posted a true copy of the within warrant at the town clerk's office, the East Baldwin Post Office, West Baldwin Post Office, and the Baldwin Community Center, a conspicuous public place within Baldwin on November 25th, 2022, which is at least 7 days next prior to election day. Article 1, to choose a moderator for said meeting.
I nominate Moody Lake. Second. Third.
You guys want to come out? You never know. You're it.
Let that happen.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Norman, do you swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state so long as you shall continue a citizen thereof, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Do you swear that you will faithfully discharge to the best of your abilities the duties incumbent upon you as the Baldwin moderator according to the Constitution and laws of the state, so help you God?
Yes, I do. I didn't bring a pen, so I didn't use it. I wish I really had, Debbie,
What?
coffee in the water.
You want mine?
Sure.
Don't.
That'd be a good idea.
Thank you all.
Just have it.
I won't have to go through the preamble. I think everybody here has been to a few town meetings and knows how to act, so let's just go right to Article 2, to see if the town will vote to increase the allocated spending from the ARPA reserve account funds to $60,000 for the relocation of the radio repeater from the Channel 8 tower to inside the control house. Do I hear a motion?
Accepted, right?
Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion on Article 2, the radio repeater thing. Questions? Yeah. Yes. Tower up on Pleasant Hill? No. This is the WMTW Channel 8 tower on Douglas Hill Road. Our town repeater, if you look at that tower, there's two platforms on it. The bottom platform is 500 foot level, the top is 900, and then it goes from there. And as a condition of Channel 8's grant for the tower, they are required to provide us the facilities free forever, including electricity till death do us part. And right now, all the radio stuff is up there at that 500 foot platform, the porch. Well, that gets darn inconvenient some days in February. And I guess we have had, Bruce, haven't we had some...
Last year, we started having, a year ago, trouble in December, January, and it was October before we could get our guys up there to repair the stuff.
So what this does is puts all the electronics down in the building, and they use coaxial cable to go up the tower, and the antenna sits up there all lonesome, and hardly nobody has to worry. Further questions, comments? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of Article 2 as read, please raise your hand. Those opposed? The article appears to pass unanimously. Move on to Article 2, to see if the town will vote to approve the Town of Baldwin Disorderly House Ordinance. We have a motion? Moved and seconded. Questions, comments, discussion? Laurie?
I don't have a copy of the new version, I just quick looked it up, online. And I do think it seems better than the, draft, but I still
Here's the
have
new
a
one.
problem with, I think it's 5.
Is there anybody else that would like a copy?
Yeah, I feel a copy.
So 5, under definitions, number 4, so this is basically defining what disorderly events are, and everything else seems fine, but number 4 is other similar activities in the building or outside the building itself. I just have a problem with how vague that is. What does similar mean?
Similar to loud music, loud noise, people being intoxicated.
Right.
We just want to have to spell out every specific activity, because I don't think we can imagine them all. And, but you can imagine, somebody doing something that is, disorderly. And, so, I don't know that if you left it just to the first 3, that you get everything that we want to include, but I think it is a bit vague. I passed it through, David Laurie. Let me see if he had. No, he did not. He did not change that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel that could leave open too much room for, interpretation. And I guess my feeling is I would vote for it except for that. I can't vote for it, it's got that condition in it.
Further questions, comments? Gary?
So just a further clarification on the part that she has an issue with. So is it basically saying disorderly that they're drunk and rowdy inside the house, and now they come out and they're drunk and rowdy on the front porch or out in the yard? And if you're saying that's too general, Lori, is that what that's implying? Is both inside and outside the disorderly, or what does that mean?
Well, it was Laurie's comment, you have to ask her. Laurie?
I mean, what it says is other similar activities. So it's kind of saying not just drunk and disorderly, all of that, but whatever other activities that are similar, but, you know, what I might think is disorderly might be different from what a lot of people think.
Well, my hope would be, and I can't speak for the board or whatever, but when I read through that, there's going to be a hearing, there's going to be whatever representation, either attorney for the disorderly people over here, and that's when that would get clarified, whatever that, if that's nitpicking or specific, it would come out at that time, wouldn't it? I mean, they're not going to put the cuffs on them and throw them in jail because similar, I don't read it that way.
Well, I guess my feeling is I think everyone's protected if it's very specific about what falls under the category. I don't know how, I mean, if it's in here, it's the law, so, you know, I guess you could argue about what that means.
If you go to the top of the paragraph, where it starts, just before, number 1, it says, this includes but is not limited to the following disorderly events. So that's another.
Right. That's true.
And it's very common language to be used.
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it eventually be at the discretion of the police that show up at the home or the location, and then it may end up going to court from there?
Well, the way this thing works is, there has to be, the police have to be called. And so they have produced a report. Probably there's a citizen that has produced a complaint. And when we've received X number of complaints, we as the select board are to review them and decide whether it's been a disorderly event. And then we, as a group, call whoever it is that's
causing the disturbance in for a hearing. So it gets discussed. It's not just an automatic thing. There's a discussion about what has happened, they get to defend themselves. And then, we make a decision, so.
So, not meaning to play down your question about similar activities, but if there was a similar activity that was brought to the attention of the board, wouldn't your discretion determine whether or not that was a disorderly activity or not, even though it's not, maybe not specifically listed?
Yeah, so I'll just read you from the top of the third page here. Upon notification of a probable disorderly event, the select board will request documentation from law enforcement entities with local jurisdiction. The select board will review all the documentation at the next full select board meeting and classify each dispatch as either a substantiated disorderly event or an unsubstantiated one. However, the select board shall not classify any dispatch or event as substantiated disorderly event if the dispatch arose from a disturbance of people protecting themselves or not. And then, once we've determined that it is a disorderly event, this is the opinion of the board. There's a hearing. Upon receiving information for 3 substantiated disorderly events within 60 days at the property, the select board shall schedule a public hearing to determine whether the evidence supports the finding that a property is a disorderly house. And through that process, we'll filter out whether it is or isn't. And, so it's not totally arbitrary, and just up to the select board. Eventually, it's up to the opinion of the select board, but it's through a public hearing process. It's transparent, and people get the chance to appear and defend themselves.
Further questions, comments, discussion?
Is there one more of these,
Glenn?
Oh, I'll take that one. Thank you.
It still requires visits from the police. The police have to be involved in it. Can't be a neighbor complaining about a neighbor or anything else and bringing it to the board. Must be responded to by the police in order to count, if you will. Yes?
Yes, it's a police report, and, although I would suspect a lot of these will originate with a neighbor complaining.
One of the other things that, was put in here to try to clarify and put some boundaries around what events count and what events don't count is that a disorderly house is not caused by activities normally associated with and permitted by residential farming or business occupancy of a property as defined in the land use ordinances. So, people cutting trees down with chainsaws or, doing things like that that are loud, but, that's not gonna trigger, this. I think that's helpful.
Yeah. Did you have something you wanted to say at the door? Okay, I wasn't sure if your hands were kind of in the air or what. Further questions, comments, discussion? Wes?
I've gone over this with a fine tooth comb. As most of you know, I've retired CEO now, and I've handled 2 towns for 8 years. Sometimes I had double trouble. One of the problems is enforcement, and the beauty of this is that the CEO or the selectmen make no decision. The police are called in, law enforcement is called in to decide if there's a problem. In our ordinance, like a nuisance ordinance or noise ordinance, how do we decide what is okay and what is too much? Policemen have been in many teams and have made decisions like that and had legal authority and legal backup. So it's based on their decision that this ordinance works. complaints are written up, then it goes into the selectmen's hand to evaluate it. It has separated, domestic violence from, neighborly, disruption. It is spelled out in here that, when the police are called in, the source is from the neighborhood, not from the house. So the disturbance is affecting the neighborhood, land adjacent, or it's spilled out in the road and whatnot, so that's why this is good. And the law enforcement, has stepped in to begin the wheels turning to make this work. One of the problems in interpretation that I had, in dealing something like this is that as a CEO, I'm enforcing land use ordinance. Individuals' activities, individuals' behavior is not land use ordinance. So this expands the enforcement and makes it workable. So I recommend it very strongly. Yeah, it's a positive start. It's very much needed. There are a couple little shortcomings in here which I'm not going to get into, but I think it'll be straightened out if we adopt the ordinance and go through a year or two of dealing with it. The requirements can be tweaked. Otherwise, it's a start. And why it's a start is, as CEO and Don CEO now, is the secret is, as a code enforcement officer, I have absolutely no enforcement. None. My enforcement is to interpret the ordinance, talk to the landowner, the violator, and convince them what is right and what's not. And it's amazing, most everybody wants to comply. So I didn't have too much violence really for disruption. So the only way an ordinance is enforced is for the CEO to convince the landowner what to do. If after a certain process, which is 3 warnings, it doesn't happen, then the CEO turns it over to the selectmen, and they decide whether to spend money or not to take it to court. Only the judge can make the decision. That's it. With this and the police action, you're short-circuiting the system where it can be turned over to the selectmen, and they can go into a consent agreement and begin an enforcement that will result with hopefully a favorable ending. I recommend it.
Matt?
So, I don't know how many people here tonight have been following the events that led to the need for the disorderly house ordinance, but I'd certainly like to thank Peter Marion from Pigeon Brook Road for being patient and persistent and bringing the problems to the town, and for Bob to really driving this disorderly house ordinance. One of the interesting things that we learned in this process, and why this is so important, is when we talk to the police described Baldwin as kind of no man's land and ripe for and being utilized for drug houses. The drug subculture in the greater area knows that Baldwin is rural, that it doesn't have a police force, and nor do we pay for the county to have police here. So they can set up their houses and operate relatively unfettered. And that has been happening, and it has been impacting the quality of life of residents with families and small children. So as Wes said, this may not be perfect, but boy, do we need it as a town to try and start doing something to help out the citizens whose lives have been being negatively impacted by the drug activity that's been taking root in the town.
Thanks, Matt. Anything further? Questions, comments? Ready to vote? Okay. Article 3, to see if the town will vote to approve the Town of Baldwin disorderly house ordinance. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? The article passes, but not unanimously. Before we get to Article 4, I would ask everybody to be particularly careful on their way home from the meeting tonight. I predict cataclysmic geological events. I agree with everything that Laurie said. That don't happen often. Article 4, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment? Those opposed? Adjournment passes.